All right, guys. Well, I'm going to talk to you today about SharePoint and specifically some web design stuff. So hopefully you've heard of SharePoint. In fact, let me just kind of do a show of hands. Who here has heard of SharePoint at some point in their life? Okay, that's pretty good odds. And then let's say, who here maybe knows if they have SharePoint either at their facility or if you're a consultant and you work with clients that use SharePoint? Okay, still pretty good. Okay, cool. Well then, you'll probably understand a lot, maybe a little, some of what I've been talking about, but hopefully you'll walk away feeling a lot better about some of this stuff. So, basically, what I specifically want to talk about is modern web design at SharePoint. Now, that might be an interesting mix. Usually, you think of SharePoint, you think of IE6, something like that. But things have changed. Stranger things have happened over at Microsoft these days. Everyone's getting along. All right, so first of all, about me, just really quick, I'll let you know who I am. I work, eat, breathe, spend the time on the iPad instead of going to bed, reading and learning about SharePoint. It's what I do. I've been doing it for a while. I work for a company down in Indianapolis. I've got some Microsoft certs, if that matters. So anyway, getting going. First, I want to talk a little bit about SharePoint in general, just for those who maybe aren't as familiar with it. And then again, going into responsive design, some really cool subjects around how to make SharePoint play with modern stuff. A little bit of Angular, and then some concluding thoughts. Okay, so why SharePoint? Well, by the show of hands here, that's the reason why. I mean, the chances are you probably already have it. And if you don't, there's even a free version, so you can have it. It doesn't take a lot to get going with SharePoint. Most organizations have it. And so why not look at how better to use it? And to be honest, I can't tell you how many times I've run into organizations where IT somehow inherits SharePoint. Someone in marketing, someone in sales decides, we want SharePoint, and now you have to support it. Okay, so there's a lot that comes in SharePoint. You probably can't see every feature. That's not really the point. The point is to tell you there's a lot there. That's part of the reason why it's so popular. Microsoft has built a very cool web-based platform. And what this can allow you to do is everything from collaboration, things like Bill and I both need to be able to edit a Word document at the same time and see each person's edits and all that really kind of cool stuff without it being in Google Docs where they read it as well. Or maybe it's something more like we need some workflows that go through the business processes. We need to be able to aggregate tasks from every project within the organization in one place so that I know what I'm working on. Or it might even just be business intelligence or integration with Hadoop, or other things of that nature. So there's a lot you can do. Specifically in 2013, Microsoft took it a step farther. There was this product that they had purchased called Fast Search. If you wanted to install Fast Search within your organization, it was going to cost you anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000, which meant that it wasn't a very popular product over at Microsoft. In 2013, they integrated it into SharePoint, and what that really means is kind of like this little picture over here. What I'm doing a lot of these days is search through presentation, or presentation with search. So when I have a customer who's interested in a dynamic web page where maybe they need to present training material to their organization, and they want the videos that they just uploaded to automatically show up based on related material, we use search for that. The index has already indexed everything within the environment, and it can instantly present related material, best bets, sorting, filtering, all that kind of good stuff. And so that's another major thing that makes SharePoint pretty awesome when you get it going right. Okay, a little bit more about what's changed. If you worked in SharePoint in the past, I'm sorry. I feel for you, I did too. It wasn't very fun. But that's really what's changed. Instead of XSLT, ASP, all those nasty things that you only had to learn to make it work with SharePoint. Now you can use things like HTML5, JavaScript, Bootstrap, Angular, Knockout, whatever your kind of favorite library of choice is, you can now use them. Okay, so going a little bit deeper, what that really meant as far as the pain. So you had your designer. He lived in Dreamweaver, because we're talking about a few years ago. Nobody does that now. And he created this awesome HTML. He loved it. It was beautiful. And then you had to use something called SharePoint Designer, and you hated it because you had to make it all work together. And somehow, when you put the design into SharePoint, it never looked the way it looked when the designer had it. Anyway, it was bad. What's changed is now you're using, we'll say WebStorm because that's a sponsor, or Sublime Text, or whatever your favorite IDE is. And you're creating not just the HTML, but now you can upload that HTML, and SharePoint automatically converts it for you into ASPX nastiness. So you don't have to. And then you can add some snippets on top of it. So like, you want to add a search box, grab the snippet, drop it right onto your HTML, now you have a search box. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But this is the key, this is what makes it all work. There's something in SharePoint now called Design Manager. Basically, you map your URL as a network drive. So this means that I can do it on my little gray PC over there, or wait a minute. And then I can upload my HTML, work with it from there, all good. Then again, there's this thing called a snippet gallery, where I have this beautiful little ribbon. If you've used Word before, you know how a ribbon works. You click on your favorite thing that you want to be able to add to your HTML. It previews it for you. You can kind of mess around with it. Maybe you want to add a certain style to it, some classes that you have maybe in Bootstrap, and then you paste it into your HTML. And if you might notice, it's a little small, but the way it pastes is commented out, so your IDE doesn't explode seeing all this ASP that doesn't know what to do with it. All right, so let me show you that really quick. Okay. So basically, I have my SharePoint homepage. It's a little bit boring, getting back to that later. But I'm going to come over here to Site Settings. And there is this Master Pages and Page Layouts area. And in here is basically where all your design elements live, eat, and breathe. So with that in mind, for today's story, I have a fake company called Blue Line. And when I get in here, I have my HTML file that I can work with. And every single time I make a change to it, SharePoint automatically updates my .master file. So just to kind of give you a little primer in ASP.NET, depending on how much you mess with that personally, in SharePoint you have your master page, which is very similar to the way ASP.NET has worked for a while. But then on top of that, you have what are referred to as page layouts. So your master page is kind of your header, your footer, maybe your navigation. Then your page layouts give you the ability to customize the way the content looks. You have as many page layouts as you want. Maybe one has some best bets on the right, another one just is nice and full, maybe another one is designed just for presenting pictures, and then you finally can create your content, and that's something that your end user basically does, so they don't need to know about all this page layout stuff and whatnot.
Can you nest additional master pages? Like, if I remember correctly, like in MVC, you could have a site master page, and then you could have one that inherited from that and added a little more stuff, and then your end page could actually have its own layout that went inside of a content presenter inside of that, or is this just one level?
That's a good question. Nesting, I would say, goes as far as the page layout. The page layout is almost like another master page. It goes to the next level, and then your content sits on top of that. Now, granted, if you're using Angular.js, you may have even more layers that are on the JavaScript side. Okay, anywho, so over here I have my JavaScript folder, my fonts, my CSS, all the stuff I might normally have. And more to the point, since I did it earlier, just show you over here. Here's my map drive, and here's the exact same folder structure. So I'm able to kind of play with this. And again, I will come back to that in a moment and show you a little bit more. But over here, I also have my design manager. And then I have that upload file step. And again, I can just basically grab the URL from here and map it to wherever I need to map it. And then there's that same directory structure. Once I do that, again, SharePoint then takes over from there for me. I can edit master pages, I can edit page layouts, I can edit something called display templates, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But with that in mind, when it converts a HTML file successfully, it shows me a little status of convert successfully. There are a few times where something can get messed up, like if you leave, I don't know, let's say a style element open-ended, which I happened to do earlier today, so I know that's what happens. It will fail to convert. But anyway, so now it kind of shows me a nice preview of what this design will look like. And from here, from the preview, I can click on snippets. I was telling Rob earlier that I think my hard drive's going dead, so forgive me if this is a little slow. And again, I can choose my favorite snippet. So by default, it's showing me like the top nav. Maybe I want to choose the site title. Whatever it is, I can then just cut and paste this snippet down here right into my HTML. Okay. Oh. I will also note that I decided, as someone who has been using a Mac for a while, that I should try to use Keynote. So forgive me if I do not know Keynote very well. All right. There we are. Okay. So let's talk about responsive design. Now, when I first started doing this, most of the designs I was doing for intranets were not responsive. Maybe it's fixed width, something kind of cool like that. Maybe it kind of mimics what the public-facing website will look like. But it really wasn't responsive. Things have changed. When you talk to most organizations today, they're now saying things like, this new SharePoint thing, can my guys in the sales field use it on their tablet? Can I check my tasks on my phone? Can whatever. So it's changed the whole conversation. Now, responsive is almost, it needs to be a given. I have to be able to make sure that everyone can get to SharePoint from any device. Of course, assuming that VPN and all that other stuff is worked out. Okay, so let's use some fun buzzwords. I don't know if you've heard of any of these, but long and the short of it, what we want to talk about is more towards this side than this side. Historically speaking, when you talk about responsive design, just kind of some food for thought, you kind of started with the desktop, and then if you're a web designer, you would show maybe a customer, look at this, and you shrink your browser down, and it all shrivels up, and it's really cool. But when it comes to load time, it's not so cool. Now we're loading a bunch of content that maybe we don't even need, because if it's going to go on a phone, the phone has to load the desktop view and then adjust from there. So, recommended approach, think mobile first. Start with your mobile design, start with the smallest amount of content you need on that small phone. And usually that's going to be different. Usually you want to just show the key information of a specific page to that mobile user, and then work your way back up. Okay, with that in mind, there's a few key thoughts to have in mind when you're talking about responsive design. One quick note, there are some really awesome frameworks that do all this stuff for you out of box. And so you don't have to try to figure this stuff out, just read their documentation. I personally like Bootstrap, but I know there's a lot of folks who like Foundation, and there's a few other really good ones out there that work well around responsive design. But in general, the thought being here, first of all, The responsive design gives you this fluid grid. Gives you this idea that if I'm on a big screen, I want 12 columns. But when I'm on a little phone, maybe I only want 4 or 6 columns. And everything should kind of adjust based on how many columns are at my disposal. In addition to that, we want flexible media. And I'll just tell you right now, one of the things I love about Bootstrap is that it can even take those iframe YouTube videos and make them responsive. And so there are some really cool things you can do about around your media to make sure that, again, maybe it loads faster because it's a smaller version of the file. Maybe the text sizes are a little smaller based on the size of the device, all that kind of good stuff. And then at the end of the day, the way it's all really working under the hood is these media queries. Now, I will tell you, from a design standpoint to implementation, this probably doubles the time to get it done, maybe triples. Because now you're not just designing CSS for one device, you're designing CSS for many devices. And that takes a lot of testing, and well, I'm jumping into some next slides, so I'll stop there. But just something to keep in mind, if you want to go responsive, it's awesome. But think about it, plan for it, make sure you have the budget or whatever else you might need to do it. And again, I can't stress enough how awesome it is to, rather than, let's say, hide this background, just not show the background at all if we load the mobile CSS first. So just kind of some cool stuff there. All right, so let me get to another demo. Okay, so here is a responsive design for my new live intranet portal. And I can do some, cool stuff here, kind of as you would expect. And again, the content just basically shifts based on the size of the device. All right, so going back over to my map drive over here, the file I just showed you, that's this one right here, my blueline.html. I'm going to drag and drop it over here into my SharePoint site. All right.
So the first version you just showed was just straight HTML.
Oh yeah. I almost, I need to make sure, you guys need to know I'm not cheating. Here it is. It's just HTML.
Okay.
In fact, I'll show you I'm doing things that you would normally do when you're designing with HTML. I've got all my JavaScript at the bottom. This is going to be important because some of this changes a little bit when we go SharePoint. Oh, it logged me out. All right. So over here, there's a couple things you can do. You can create a minimal master page if you want to just hard code it yourself. It's kind of cool. It gives you a very generic master page to start with, again in HTML, and you can kind of design it from there. So if you know you're going to design a SharePoint from the get-go, not a bad idea. But most of the time, that's not how organizations work. Most of the time, design is its own separate, either branch, division, maybe you hire out someone to come up with your design, whatever that is. So with that in mind, I'm going to convert an HTML file into a master page. So now I'm going to go back into my blue line folder. There's my HTML file. There we go. All right, conversion successful. Now, it did say conversion successful, but I have a feeling here. Let it load. All right, it's not too bad. Not perfect. We've got this little yellow doohickey down here. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that this actually does continue to work in SharePoint. So what I'm going to do here is I did an import earlier. So I can show you just a couple of things here. I'm going to open up my HTML file in the most powerful IDE in the world. All right, that might be a little hard to read, but here, let's do this really quick. So, yay, we can see. If you look over here, I've got this JavaScript file still down here at the bottom. Now, it worked. You saw it. It actually did convert successfully. I will tell you though that this JavaScript is completely unaware of SharePoint. And once you start wanting to manipulate SharePoint, present it in your own way, maybe call SharePoint JavaScript libraries and bring in content, all that kind of really cool stuff, this isn't going to work very well. SharePoint has a solution for that. Over here in the import I did earlier, what I did was I converted those JavaScript files into SharePoint :scriptlink files. Basically what it does is it tells SharePoint about your JavaScript. Now, SharePoint can control when that JavaScript loads. It can still load it at the end of the process rather than at the beginning of the page load. But at the end of the day, what you're really doing is you're making sure SharePoint understands that it exists and can play with it, and vice versa. Now your JavaScript can play with SharePoint. And you can you have better control over it again when everything loads.
So is that a manual process? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so with that in mind, I will tell you, there are some really awesome logs out there. I have URLs later for anyone who's interested. But if you're interested in this, basically all you have to do is search for SharePoint ScriptLink or SharePoint CSS registration. That's the other thing I did. So, SharePoint has its own CSS. If I load my CSS, just kind of in general, I don't have a whole lot of control over which one loads first. But by doing it this way, you notice I have these IDs. So I have Bootstrap CSS, I've got a Google font I'm loading, and then I have my own CSS. But over here on the other side, I have after. So basically I'm saying, after the SharePoint CSS loads, then load Bootstrap. So let's undo everything SharePoint did. And then when all that gets done loading, I want to be able to load mine after the Google font. So now I've got my Google font loaded, I've got all that other stuff, that Bootstrap stuff at my disposal. Now my CSS, what makes this design mine, has everything at its disposal. Everything's loaded first. So these are two big things I would highly recommend taking advantage of when you are working with master pages. One other thing that I did too, just to let you know, back over here on our quickly converted file, you'll see here I have a header. That was where I had that rotating banner. But then just above that, I had my own navigation, again from Bootstrap. So if you've used Bootstrap before, you know you can have this, you can have the nav, and you can style it the way you want, have drop-down menus and all that kind of really cool stuff. When I converted it over, SharePoint put all of that stuff, the nav bar right here, underneath its own div. So SharePoint is always going to have this thing called the S4 workspace. And then within the S4 workspace, there's going to be this S4 body container. You don't ever have to care about it. I mean, if you want to add your own classes or something to it, go right ahead. It's not going to break anything. But don't delete them. They're kind of required for SharePoint. But I don't want my nav bar there because I had a sticky nav bar. I want my nav bar to be really pretty, and as you scroll, it stays there. So with that in mind, what I did in my final file was basically rip that out of there and put it just above. So now, if I get down here, here's my nav bar, and then a little bit farther, there's my workspace. Now, one more little thing I did. Up here, all this commented out stuff. This SharePoint's top nav bar. So I took my nav bar that my designer did, I ripped out the content, that fake content that doesn't go anywhere, and I put in this new dynamic snippet from the snippet gallery. So there, that is where that comes into play. If you have a design that your designer comes up with that has a search bar or search box, you go to the snippet gallery, you copy the search box, and you just literally drop it in where it belongs. And again, it's commented out, so you don't have to worry about that ASPX stuff. And then again, for me, I wanted to have my navigation bar come over, so I did that. The one last thing that I did, when you convert a master page, SharePoint has one snippet it puts in for you. All the way at the bottom of this newly converted file, there's this snippet right here, the content placeholder main. This is where everything else lives besides the master page. So, we talked about how you have master pages, and then inside the master page you have a page layout, and inside the page layout you have your individual pages. They all live there. Now, one little tip, you can have as many placeholders as you want. So let's say you want to have a more of like a fixed width style design that has a center content area, and then maybe a right rail that has some dynamic content that lives in the master page, as well as a placeholder for some additional stuff unique to the page layout. You can just add as many of these placeholders as you want. You can name them whatever the heck you want. As soon as you have them in the master page, they are now consumable by the page layouts. But anyway, the bottom line is this thing lives all the way at the bottom of the page where it's kind of stupid and doesn't really help you. So what I'm going to do is I took that and I put that right there. So where I normally have my page content with my container field, again, if you're used to Bootstrap, you know what a container is, and I put my placeholder right there. So I know that within my Bootstrap responsive design container lives all my SharePoint content. So at the end of the day, what all this really means, oh my goodness, I'm running so freaking late. I will have to really speed up guys. Or maybe you'll come back next week for part 2. Anyway.
Yeah, next week I'll cut off for you.
I'll save the pizza for next week.
Now I can set my master page. And by the way, SharePoint has 2 master pages. It has a site master page and a system master page. Kind of the idea being that like when you're in WordPress, you've got the thing that looks really pretty and then the thing that's actually productive, the behind the scenes versus the front. This is the same kind of thing. So you can have one design that's really more for collaboration and allow for lots of tables and all that content that SharePoint always has, dashboards, whatever. And then you can have the other design that's more for the marketing team to let everyone know that vacation is coming, whatever. All right, so with that in mind, I'll go ahead and click OK. And now, there we go. I have my cool looking page, but this is the SharePoint content. If you remember, that's all SharePoint. So that's that little box, that placeholder, is where all the SharePoint stuff lives. Now, I could take this same design and I could do the same responsive type stuff. It looks all really cool. Now, granted, these 2 columns are going to stay 2 columns because I haven't bootstrapped the page layout yet. But if I had more time, I'd do both. All right. So there is some responsive design goodness. Let's see if this clicker still works. Yes!
That's just like you.
Maybe not so much. I don't enjoy that one. Anyway, all right. So one more quick thing, and I want to show you more, but I'm running out of time. There are these things called display templates. I mentioned search earlier. basically, if you've ever gone to SharePoint search, there's like this page, you search, you get results. It's like Google or anything else. But behind the scenes, what's really happening is there's this control that can have its own styling. And then each individual item can have its own styling. This is really, really, really cool because you can title these. You can title the items, you can title the controls, and now the end user can add a SharePoint results web part to a page, maybe link it to best bets or something, and then choose the style that you created for them that fits what they need best, without them having to know any HTML, CSS, all the other stuff that of course they don't know. That's your job, right? So this is really nice. I'll just do a really, really, really quick demo here on this. This is one that I developed for our internal team. We have a sales team who is really busy, which is good. I'm glad. I'm going to keep me busy. But they have thousands and thousands of documents, and they have them everywhere. They have these project scoping worksheets, and they have these client documents, RFPs, all this other stuff. So what we created was this search page that isn't even a search page. I have a drop-down box right here, or I can start to type, and it kind of automatically finds the right results for me. So maybe I want to look for something for City of Fishers, because I don't think anyone here is from City of Fishers.
So that's select two. Is that search box select two right there? The JavaScript?
I'm using Angular for that. So I do a call against, SharePoint has a list of all my clients, and so I'm bringing it in through Angular, and then when I choose it, I pass it to my search box.
But that drop down that you just were using, that was an Angular component, or was?
I'm sorry, no, that's jQuery UI. It's a plugin of jQuery UI. It was the coolest one. I wanted to make it look
That's nice.
So anyway, and then again, because it's a search box, I can come over here and I can filter against maybe, is it just a SharePoint project, or who is the author, all that kind of good stuff. So anyway, it's all SharePoint, but I created these really pretty templates that are all bootstrappy. So I can scroll this in and it still works really cool and all that kind of good stuff. All right. Oh, now the clicker goes. Oh, yeah. All right, so again, reusable code. It's already there. The user doesn't need to know anything about how to do anything other than how to drop any web part into SharePoint. Which I didn't really talk about what web parts are, but hopefully you know what those are already. So I don't have to. All right, finally, a really quick look at Angular. I will tell you almost everything that we're doing where I work is Angular. We started with Bootstrap. I'm sorry, not Bootstrap. Knockout. Knockout's really cool. If you've ever used it, it's all about kind of observing things, changing them in real time. Angular takes it a step further. First of all, it's really cool because it's open source and everyone's using it, and there's tons of books. And even better, I love Pluralsight. I'm on there all the time, watching videos and learning even more awesome goodies around Angular. And it's completely compatible with SharePoint. So you can just add it and create really cool apps that call back into SharePoint and do things. Here's just a quick look at why Angular is awesome. If you didn't know, Google made it. Google Feedback, they spent 6 months, 3 developers, working on that thing. They rewrote it with Angular. It took them 3 weeks. So when it comes to what's good about MVC, that kind of rapid development, getting started fast, the same thing is true with Angular. It's got all these little building blocks, and it's becoming a community that's very well supported, where if there's something you want to do, Google is awesome. You just have, I want to do this, and someone's done it already and shows you all the code. That kind of stuff exists with Angular these days. Plus, it's very well defined. So maybe I have my controllers, I have my services. I can separate my JS files the way maybe I do normally with my CS files. And again, it's kind of a model view, whatever. It has controllers. It can be just like an MVC, but it also has these other things. It has these awesome things called services where you can call out to databases. It has templates where you can take the HTML And we talked earlier about it doesn't have to be quite as nested in only those 3 layers. Maybe all of your little elements that exist in a master page are actually individual HTML files that Angular brings in to build the master page. Now you can have individual developers working on each feature. All right. I don't know if I have time for the demo.
Do it.
Do it, go for it.
Do it quickly.
All right. So here we go. Here is a quick little thing called a SharePoint app. So one more note about SharePoint. If you're someone like me who developed things in SharePoint a couple of years before 2013 came out, then you ran into a situation where it didn't upgrade very well. You had to basically rewrite it the next time a new version of SharePoint came out. That was stupid. Microsoft knew it was stupid and they fixed it. They came out with something called apps. The app is kind of like an app on your phone. You upgrade the iOS to the next version or Android to the next version. You don't have to uninstall your app and reinstall it. That'd just be stupid. Anyway, you don't have to do that with SharePoint anymore either. So I created this app, and again, it's got some controllers in here. I've got a couple of services. Oh man, there we go. So I have some nice organization going on here, but at the end of the day, oh, what did I do? All right, there we go. So here's my my ASPX file. I'm bringing in my different stuff. I got some jQuery here. I got Angular. I got Bootstrap, so that I can still make it look cool. If you haven't played with Moment, very nice. Really makes dates easy. That could be one of these things. Anyway, I got some of my own CSS, and again, down here is where I have all my Angular stuff. So I've got my app file where I basically register my Angular app, and then I have some services and some controllers to do some kind of cool stuff. If you haven't used Angular before, I don't have time today to dig through every piece, but if you have used Angular before, then you know what I'm talking about. And again, down here, I have my SharePointy stuff. This is really cool. This is really cool. These are APIs, JavaScript APIs for SharePoint. So I didn't write these. I just registered them. Now, I want a people picker from SharePoint. I got a people picker. I want a search box up, whatever I need. I just find the right JavaScript file that Microsoft has made for me already and already lives on my server. And I can start interacting with that as well. All right, so.
Or maybe drag it out into some window.
I believe I probably did. Yep. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run this thing. So what did I actually do? Well, I created a SharePoint app. It's an Angular app here with some Bootstrap as well to make it look pretty. Basically, it's a task list, because whenever you're developing any app for the first time, where do you start? A task list. So I did that. But here's what's really cool. The task list lives in SharePoint. But I'm using Angular to do some kind of cool stuff. Like, for instance, I'm using Bootstrap to have a nice little drop-down box here. So like, let's say I have a test that's coming up. Boo, I want to postpone it. Forget about it, 6 months. All right, or I can come over here and I can click edit. And here's really cool. I mean, this is something you can't really do in SharePoint normally. I can inline edit. So maybe I want to put my stuff in here. It's thinking, come on, you can do it. There we go. And it found me because it's using that people picker JavaScript file I'm talking about. Click save. Ta-da! And then again, I can come down here and I'll just say, there we go. And again, it's in SharePoint now. Like, it went out, called SharePoint, edited to SharePoint, came back and says, look, it's in SharePoint now.
Now,
So
do you run this locally? Now, do you have SharePoint installed on that server, or have they made that easier? Because you used to have to have the you know, the
Oh,
import that can use them.
If you notice this right here, if you see all these little buttons right here, that's a good indication that's not on my box. No.
Oh, okay.
This is Office 365.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so basically I added another task. And in fact, I even put my name next to it because I'm the user. Forgot I did that. And again, I can go back over here to edit, and then maybe I want to complete it. Now, oops, save. And look at that. So anyway, there you go. That's just using Angular, a little Bootstrap, making something pretty. But at the end of the day, what I'm really doing is I'm calling back and forth with SharePoint. And I'm using, just so you know, because I didn't say it, I'm using REST services for this.
Yeah, the people picker API that you're using, does it just return like a JSON object that you then parse and decide how to display, or is the drop down part of that?
It's part of it.
Okay.
Part of the UI, which is, well, I take that back. It's not, but one of the things you might notice here is there's this thing, and there's this thing over here. SharePoint's still loading its CSS. So if I want to call something that's more SharePoint-y, initially it'll present it the way SharePoint normally presents it.
Okay.
I mean, I can change it if I want to.
Yeah, so you don't have to create the drop down if you don't want to.
Which is very nice.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, SharePoint does a lot of really good things really, really well. Why rewrite what SharePoint does well? We just want to be able to write things that make it do even more awesome things. Okay. Yeah, look at that. We're almost done. All right, come on, clear. Okay. So, some final tips and tricks. First thing I will tell you, navigation is difficult. I'll take a sip of water and let you think about it. You'd think it would be an easy thing, but have you seen the flame wars going on around the hamburger button?
What?
You know,
What are you talking
yeah. The way like
Too well.
you know, you start to shrink the screen. You got that little hamburger button, the little
okay.
you know, there's people who are like, that thing sucks. It's so hard. Figure out what works for you. I mean, there's all kinds of solutions out there. There's floating, there's dropping, there's collapsing. One thing to keep in mind: if you do what I did and just take the navigation as is in SharePoint and drop it into your design, it kind of works as a hover option, which kind of doesn't work on a tablet. So, with that in mind, I will tell you what my organization has done 9 times out of 10 is we create a list. And we keep it on the root site because everyone can read the root site. And then we just use a REST service or some JSON or something to call that list and then present it like it was a navigation bar. What's beautiful about that is that list can then be edited by the executive assistants and CEO or whatever. You know, someone who has no idea how SharePoint works, their job is just to make sure that navigation bar looks right, has the right links on it. So, anyway. If you're still using IE 8, I am truly sorry. But I know some organizations have to, so if you are, there are things, again, you can do for that to kind of get around that.
Throw your computers out.
but again, this is an issue when you're trying to do mobile first. So one thing to keep in mind is if you just need a fixed width design that's going to work on a tablet, it's going to work anyway. However, I will tell you, technically speaking, SharePoint 2013 supports IE 9 and above, so that slide shouldn't even exist, but I can't tell you how many times I've run into it. All right, some more things to keep in mind. I just showed you that you can add some hacks. They don't always work right. That's why I don't like them. If you can get away from the older versions of IE, do it, especially because this version of SharePoint can work with Chrome, can work with Firefox. I use it all the time on Safari. Even though it's Microsoft, they don't force you to play with Microsoft anymore, which is awesome. With that same point in mind, I'll tell you that, again, be careful as you're writing your HTML, make sure it's clean. put your JavaScript in its own file. I mean, that's best practice anyway. Put your CSS in its own file. That way, when SharePoint converts your HTML into an ASPX file, it's not trying to figure out what you're trying to do and mix up its own code as with your code, and the whole thing blows up. So just a good thing to keep in mind. Something else, make sure that your references are correct. You don't want those mixed mode errors. They're very, very painful. And again, if you do kind of just a // SharePoint figures it out for you. Again, don't forget.
That's true outside of SharePoint, for that
True.
matter.
Don't forget to publish your files. Okay, I didn't talk about this. SharePoint has this beautiful idea that you may want to be able to edit a file and your end user shouldn't see it until you're done. That's awesome. However, it sucks when you forget to push the publish button. So when you're done and you're ready to show your end users, push publish or they will not see it. Test. All right.
Why do you say don't break SharePoint?
Okay, so let me explain what that really means is 9 times out of 10, you end up getting a developer or a designer. I won't blame the developers here because we're all really good people. The designers, those guys, I don't know. They come up with brilliant ideas that they think are going to be awesome. And then they give it to you, and then you look at it and you're like, I can't do that in SharePoint. And then you try to figure out a way to do it in SharePoint. And you unintentionally make it so that the drop-down menu that was supposed to be there is over there. And you didn't even know it because you're hacking things so bad in spaghetti code and nothing works right. That's what I mean. So just make sure that as you do this stuff, test it out. Make sure that your CSS plays with SharePoint CSS, all that kind of good stuff. And another little tip, less is awesome. You know, the more you can nest your CSS with less, the less chances that you break something that SharePoint's trying to take care of. I mean, when you're dealing with just CSS alone, you kind of forget to do that. You just kind of add a tag and you start playing with it. But when you're doing less, you start thinking kind of like it's HTML. Anyway, all right. So I love this picture. Everyone at work, my boss has this on his desk. Make sure that everyone remembers it. Design is not always the same thing as user experience. If you're going to come out with a really cool design on SharePoint, make sure you talk to the end users first. Make sure you know what they want to do their job. Okay. So anyway, summing up, we created our HTML design, we mapped our drive, we added our assets, we used Design Manager to convert it, then we edited things a little bit, made sure it was SharePointy. We added some snippets. We can develop our JavaScript, and then we publish everything. Don't forget to publish.